Reformation likes to brand itself as a leader in sustainability, but are they really being truthful? And is their clothing quality good enough to warrant the price point? Let's find out together. I have two dresses here that I'm going to critique from a design standpoint and talk a bit about the sustainability. So first we have this little white number, which is one of two dresses that I wore to my engagement party. It's made of a lightweight woven fabric called voile with a fiber content of 50% organic cotton and 50% Lenzing Ecovero viscose. These are both what I would consider to be environmentally preferable fibers. Conventionally grown cotton can have a lot of environmental problems, including monoculture, which is not good for the health of the soil and surrounding ecosystems, pesticides that are really toxic and can pollute not only the soil, but the water and the air of the surrounding environment. Organic cotton, from my understanding, does a lot more of those things, in large part because it greatly limits the use of synthetic pesticides. And then Ecovero is a type of viscose made by Lenzing that sources the base material, wood pulp, from allegedly responsibly managed forests. And they also apparently have more responsible chemical management practices than average. This dress apparently cost 288 Canadian dollars, which I'm like, wait a second, is that actually how much I paid for this? But yeah, I guess it is. So that's around 200 US. I don't usually like wearing woven fabrics that much because generally speaking, they don't naturally have stretch. However, this dress was really thoughtfully designed to have stretch and movement without adding spandex or anything like that. In addition to the flowy silhouette, which I thought was flattering and didn't look like a tent, you have gathering at the sleeves and smocking at the chest to allow the dress to conform to the body. What is smocking? Basically, it's where you make several rows of tiny gathers in the fabric and sew it down with a stretchy seam. In this case, they used a chain stitch with some kind of elasticated thread. And so when you put the garment on, those gathers can expand around the body's curves, like at the bust here. They also included this braid detail in a check pattern over the smocking, which I think is nice. It makes it look and feel a little more premium to me. At the arms and neckline, you have gathering. This is similar to smocking, but it's not exactly the same because it's not several rows of small gathered stitches. It's just one row of gathering with a big old elastic through it. But it serves the same function as smocking, which is allowing the material to stretch along the body. I also think it looks cute. Voile is typically quite a sheer fabric, so they have a double layer of fabric here, which is nice because, it allows the dress to not be see-through. The stitching looks clean and even. I'm not really seeing any loose threads. It looks cute on and fits well. Overall, I think this is a decently designed dress and I think the price is reasonable. Next, we have this Balia linen dress in red. Aside from the sexy silhouette, one of the things that I would say Reformation is best known for is their use of linen. So of course, I had to try a sexy linen dress. My first observation, and I don't know if the camera is really picking this up, is that the color is this beautiful, deep, saturated red. I find a lot of times linen garments tend to be available in paler, less colorful hues, so I really am impressed by the saturation of this red. Overall, I have to say I'm quite impressed with this dress. I think it has a lot of really great features. For instance, you've got adjustable straps with a button, which I think is really smart, especially since we're working with non-stretch material here, so you can't just throw in a stretchy fabric to just accommodate different sized people and call it a day. You have to come up with something a little more complex, which they did. The buttonholes all look really nice and neat, so that's a plus. There's smocking at the back here too, similar to the white dress, although it's a much smaller panel, and the smocking is very neat and even, similar to the white dress. And I love little details, okay, like the zipper. They bias bound the zipper tape on the inside, which they could have just left it as is or serged it or something, but no. They chose a more expensive and more aesthetically pleasing finish, which I will always appreciate. The top stitching around the zipper is quite straight, and you've got an invisible hem here at the bottom, which I think is a nice touch. Obviously, it's not completely invisible, but it's not as obvious as a normal hem, which for non-stretch fabric is typically just a row of top stitching. With an invisible hem, each stitch on the outside of the garment only goes through a few threads of the outer fabric, so you see little pricks when you look closely, but nothing from further away. I think it's also very smart what they did at the bust. They have these kind of shell-shaped cups with overlapping fabric that can expand a little bit to accommodate the bust. Unfortunately, the inside lining doesn't stretch very much, which I think kind of nullifies that effect. I think it would have been smarter if they had lined the bust area with a stretchy fabric to really take full advantage of the expansion of those cups. Speaking of the lining, it is 100% rayon dead stock fabric. I'm going to talk more about what dead stock is in a second, but rayon is a semi-synthetic fabric. I talk more about what that is in my fabric sustainability video, which I've linked below. The rayon fibers that are in this fabric are quite fine, so that makes sense as a lining to me because it's a lot softer than the outer linen fabric. Linen you can really only get to be so soft because it's a bast fiber, which means that it comes from the stalk or the stem of a plant, so you just can't can't get it to be as fine as a lot of other fibers, and as a result, it's maybe not going to be as soft. So I understand why they lined it with something else. I'm not super into wearing linen typically because I just like my garments to have a bit more stretch than what linen typically allows. I like to wear a lot of knits. I don't like to feel constrained by my clothing. And linen's properties make it a bit difficult to turn it into a knit. It probably exists. I know people have tried it, but it's just much, much more common to find it as a woven, which means that a 100% linen fabric is usually not really going to have any stretch at all. So if you're the type of person who really likes to feel hugged in by your garment and have it be very form-fitting, then a linen dress from Reformation, especially one like this that has these corset-esque panels, it's not an actual corset because it doesn't have boning in it, but anyway, then this is going to be great for you. Linen also wrinkles quite a bit. You just have to kind of embrace a little bit of wrinkling as part of the design of the garment, as part of the charm of the fabric. Linen does have a lot of benefits though. It is widely considered to be one of the best, if not the best, type of fabric to wear in hotter temperatures due to its thermoregulating properties. I believe it's also less resource intensive to cultivate than a lot of other natural fibers, so it makes sense that Reformation makes use of it so heavily for that reason. Overall, I think this is an absolutely great dress for people who appreciate this kind of silhouette and who like a tighter fit. I also think the price point is justified due to the premium construction features that it has and the thoughtful design. For the real nerds among us, or the people who just enjoy the sound of my voice as background noise, I'm going to discuss the sustainability report now. So this is a report that Reformation produced to give an overview of their environmental and ethical successes and shortcomings in 2024. Now, this appears to have been written by Reformation's internal sustainability team, which is not my favorite. Not that I have a problem with their internal sustainability team or anything. I don't know them. I don't know anything about them. It's just that obviously it's better to have this kind of report written by a third party who can independently verify the veracity of companies' claims and challenge them on things, and who ideally doesn't have any skin in the game in terms of what the results are. Because that way you're just more likely to get something that's unbiased and accurate. In this case, we just kind of have to take their word for it in terms of the claims they're making, because I'm not able to independently verify the truthfulness of what they're saying. The first section is about circularity, which according to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is a system where materials never become waste and nature is regenerated. In a circular economy, products and materials are kept in circulation through processes like maintenance, reuse, refurbishment, remanufacture, recycling, and composting. So this first claim that Reformation makes, in line with the circularity theme, is that 98% of their materials are either recycled, regenerated, or renewable. Now, this is what I like to call weaselly language, because you're kind of weaseling away from accountability in a way by saying something that is true but maybe sounds more impressive than it actually is. Because 98% sounds great, obviously, but what do these words actually mean? And in particular, what does renewable actually mean? They don't really provide a clear definition of a renewable fiber, so I am going to assume that that means any type of fiber that's not coming from fossil fuels. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I hate fossil fuels. I think they should be used extremely sparingly in clothing. But that doesn't mean that anything that's not fossil fuel derived is automatically sustainable. Natural fibers can have a host of environmental problems as well. I talk about that in my fabric sustainability video. Their next claim, which is maybe a bit more insightful, well, sort of, is that 26% of materials used are non-virgin materials, which they define as dead stock, recycled, or next gen. Dead stock essentially is leftover or surplus fabric that is going unused by whoever initially had it manufactured and is just kind of sitting around. So obviously it's better to have that be used than to have perfectly good fabric going to a landfill, although ideally we wouldn't have such an overproduction problem in fashion that dead stock is so readily available in the first place. Now, I also don't know what they mean by next gen. That can mean a lot of different things in the industry. I'm assuming they probably mean newer textile to textile chemical recycling technologies, although they don't explicitly say that. So anyway, this number is only 26%, and that's not surprising to me because textile recycling is still kind of in its infancy right now. Conventional textile recycling methods often degrade the quality of the fibers a little bit, so you need to add some virgin materials to the fabric in order to maintain the performance, which makes it pretty near impossible to make an entire fabric out of recycled fibers, with the exception possibly, I'm not quite sure, of non-textile sourced recycled polyester from like plastic bottles or something like that. I think that's a little different. However, newer textile-to-textile recycling technology is making it possible for fibers from clothing and other textiles to be turned into fibers for new textiles that have comparable performance to virgin fibers, which is really exciting. So it is great to see Reformation supporting some companies in this space like Circulose, and they seem to be supporting a number of other textile recycling initiatives to help the textile-to-textile industry reach maturity, which I think is commendable. They do have a lot of interesting circularity initiatives on the go, so I definitely think this section is worth a read if you're interested in that kind of thing. They do also have a climate section of this report, and I'm not going to go too deep into that because we'd be here all day. I'm always skeptical of terms like climate neutral and climate positive because these to me are marketing buzzwords that typically involve the use of offsets. Offsets are when you pay someone else money to fund a project that will help them reduce their emissions. And then you essentially are like, oh, I reduced all these emissions, when actually you're kind of just taking credit for the work somebody else did because you helped pay for it. Now, I don't think offsets are bad. I think offsets fund a lot of really wonderful projects, and in particular, I think offsets represent a way for wealthier companies or countries to give money to less wealthy countries or organizations to help them with important environmental projects. And I always think there's value in that, so I certainly encourage companies or other organizations with money to help fund environmental projects. That's always good. And if we have to, call something an offset to make that happen, then you know what, fine. However, offsets shouldn't replace reducing your own emissions. You still got to do that work. So that's why I don't like the term climate neutral, because a company or country's emissions could still be increasing, but they're hiding behind offsets to obscure that information. And that may be the case for Reformation. It looks like their scope 1 and 2 emissions, so those are like their more direct emissions, have increased since 2021. Oh my God, wait. So I just noticed something here. It says their total emissions are 58,199 megatons, or MT, which usually means megatons, which 1 megaton is equivalent to 1 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. I'm sorry, what? Can that possibly be correct? That can't be right. I had to reread that like 6 times, and I was like, no, I'm pretty sure that's what they're saying. For context, I did some digging. The US emitted 6,343 megatons of CO2 equivalent in 2022. And I was like, okay, what are China's? So I looked at that too. China's emissions were apparently 13,363 megatons in 2022. So this doesn't make any sense. This must be wrong. How can this possibly be right? Apparently also the world's emissions, according to the government of Canada, were 48,824 megatons. So how can Reformation's emissions be higher than the entire world's? This doesn't make sense. Okay, anyway, I'm going to leave this section alone for now, and maybe I'll email them or something to clarify. If they get back to me, I'll post their response in the description below, because what the hell was that? Anyway, the last section is social responsibility. I'm still reeling from that number in the climate section. Like, what was that? That had to be a mistake. Anyway, whatever. Okay, the social responsibility section, they talk about their rating system for suppliers and how they audit the vast majority of their tier 1 suppliers, which are the facilities that actually assemble the finished product, and a fair number of their tier 2 suppliers, which are facilities that dye, weave, print, knit, etc. their fabrics. I'm going to go to Good On You now and see what they say about their ethics. Good On You gave Reformation a 3 out of 5 for their people category. Some of the pros, it would seem, are that apparently much of Reformation's supply chain is certified by the Fair Labor Association and Blue Sign. Apparently its code of conduct covers International Labor Organizations for Fundamental Freedoms principles. I don't know what those are. I should definitely look into those. In terms of cons, it says that Reformation ensures some workers in the final production stage are paid living wages, though not in its entire supply chain. Okay, so I haven't read further into how Good On You determined all that. I can't speak to the truthfulness of these claims, but I think Good On You, from what I know, is fairly rigorous in their approach. So I think it's a good tool for consumers if you don't have a lot of time to research a company, for instance. I'm glad that Reformation at least has a code of conduct. Not everybody does. And it sounds decent, and that they audit their tier 1 suppliers and a decent number of their tier 2 suppliers to ensure compliance with the code. So it's a start, I guess. With all that being said, can I really recommend Reformation as a brand? And do I think they're truly sustainable? In terms of quality, based on the small, very small sample size I've seen, I would say that yes, I recommend them. Although, of course, just because some products are well made doesn't mean every single one would be. It can apparently, in large companies with a lot of departments and different product categories, it can really vary from category to category from what I've heard. But the ones I've seen, I would say, yeah, seem pretty well made and thoughtfully designed. In terms of sustainability, I think they've got some great initiatives in place. I'm still really confused about that number in the climate section, so I'm definitely going to email them and see if they get back to me. I think I need to hear back from them before making a conclusion on the sustainability thing, because that number is wild. So yeah, this video has been a wild ride. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next one.